WEAU-TV 13, Eau Claire.
For 50 years, you've brought WEAU-TV into your homes for news, sports, weather, and entertainment.
You've watched your friends and neighbors talk about what's going on. You've watched them dance. You've watched them enjoying life in western Wisconsin.
You've welcomed us like family, and for the next hour, we get to say thank you with a look through our own family album. We're celebrating 50 years with WEAU.
I'm Pat Kreitlow.
I'm Judy Clark. When you tell the story of a local TV station, especially after 50 years, you tell the story of a community and the people who live there.
Television is all about people, and not just the news anchors or the reporters or the sports and weather people, but about the directors, the technicians, photographers, master control operators, salespeople, managers, accounting, commercial traffic, writers, and more.
And without all these people, we couldn't tell 50 years worth of stories about more people and the stories that affect people in western Wisconsin.
And what wonderful stories we have for you this evening. Stories about people who worked at TV 13 on that first night in 1953, stories of people who watched TV 13 that first night, and stories about the people who've gathered the news, improved the technology, and entertained us for all those years.
So let's start by hearing from the people who worked here when the building looked like this.
Or the way it appeared all those years ago when television was brand new to the Chippewa Valley.
I'm surprised that we didn't have more ulcers and heart attacks than we did.
We had a very small staff. We worked very, very hard, some extremely long hours. As I said, we did a lot of our own filming and editing, but it was a lot of fun.
They were very happy that we were on the air because up to that time, people had to have antennas, and they were pulling in a station from the Twin Cities, and that was about it. So it was nice to have a local one.
And I did a show called Whatever the Weather with Gil Tanner. It was a fun thing for me to do. As I said, only got $2 a show for doing this, so I wasn't making any money doing it.
I think the earliest thing I remember about TV 13 is actually not something that I saw on TV, but my mom talking about Howard the Hat Trickey, who was an old-time weatherman at Channel 13.
He said, I don't know how long we're going to be on the air. We're not making any money. I don't see us making any money. There's not very many people who have television sets. He says, so this station may be off the air in 2-3 months.
I can remember growing up watching 13. I've kind of had this association over the years, and watching Howard the Hat Trickey do the weather. And I can remember watching him do that as he drew his cartoons wearing the fancy hat. And I said, you know, that looks like that might be fun. I guess some years later I actually started doing it. I didn't wear the fancy hat or draw the cartoons, but did start doing the weather on Channel 13.
I had a good time being on television in Eau Claire, and I did have a good time. Morning till night I had a good time. And if I'm having a good time, people around you are going to have a good time too.
It was either called Channel 13 Teen Panel or the Teen Panel. And youngsters would write to us and ask us questions, and we were the authorities on proper behavior for teenagers.
At one time, I was doing about, I was hosting about 3 late-night movies, and they were all sponsored, and they all had live commercials. And I would do sometimes 8 or 10, maybe 12 live commercials in one sitting. That was after I'd done the weather. And of course, after I was not at the White House.
So it's just a shame we couldn't preserve half the live stuff that went on the air that you could never save, because you'd laugh yourself silly.
There was a level of professionalism that was set in the late 1970s that throughout the 1980s we were still trying to meet that level, and if not, improve upon it. I know the group of people that I worked with, we were always trying to meet the challenge of being a better TV station and a better newsroom day in and day out, and actually that made it a lot of fun, and it also made us far better reporters, and I hope that it also made the communities better served.
When we started, you did a 6 o'clock and a 10 o'clock news. 5 o'clock news came along. Then morning news came along. And the station has grown. News has become more and more important.
You walked in and the people who worked here obviously took so much pride. It was more than a job to them. And looking back, it was like a family.
At one point when I was working there, we had a traveling basketball team, WEAU-TV Wax-Way All-Stars. I know a lot of people are going to remember this. We used to go and play faculties or community groups from small towns. I mean, we'd go to Cornell, we'd go to Cadott, Spooner, wherever. I'm telling you, the reaction that we would get and the turnout that we would get, packed high school gymnasiums to come watch us, a bunch of goofballs on a basketball team, come into town. It was just amazing. And you don't get that kind of reaction, that kind of reception, unless you are just extremely unique in the community. And I think that's something that Channel 13 had going for itself from the very beginning.
TV 13 has been something special throughout the years, and we'll hear more from the people who played a role here throughout the coming hour.
It's exciting to look toward the future of our station and community, but it's also fun to look back. We want to share this film from a privately made 1953 documentary called This Is Our Town, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, when the cars on the street cost a whopping $1,700 in 1953. The average annual salary was $4,700. The stock market average was $281. And a gallon of milk was only 94 cents, and a loaf of bread, 16 cents. How times change. We'll be back celebrating 50 years with WEAU in just a moment. As you heard from Howard Trickey earlier, the decision to build a television station in Eau Claire wasn't one of the most confident decisions made in the business world.
One radio station manager in the area put it this way: AM radio would not be replaced by television as the dominant medium in this country. Oh well. What he didn't appreciate was that across the nation, the television boom was well underway. In 1953, there were more than 20 million households with sets.
When Channel 13 went on the air, there were already more than 3,000 people in Eau Claire County who owned television sets, so the president of Central Broadcasting Company applied for a license from the FCC, built the first tower, purchased equipment, and hired employees.
After that, it was a matter of getting the signal on the air and getting viewers to tune in. And as Jeremiah Junkers tells us now, that part wasn't so difficult after all.
In 1953, this new piece of equipment was starting to become a more familiar setting in area living rooms.
It just kind of, there was our TV set, and just like Grandpa's, only we couldn't get Channel 4 or Channel 5 from the cities. It was too snowy.
We were used to watching the stations from the cities that were just nothing but snow.
Then, out of the years of snow, came a new car in town with the license plate of WEAU Channel 13.
Oh yeah, we heard that it was going to come on, and we were anxiously awaiting it, and, you know, looking forward to being able to watch television.
On December 23, 1953, when Eau Claire area residents turned to Channel 13, WEAU television was on the air for the first time.
So when you got something you could actually really see, it was fun. It was great.
From the first minute, the programs were sparse with cast-offs and warmed-over comedies.
We did travel shows where a lot of the things that were on the films that were brought in. A lot of shows that, you know, were just, they were the early comedies from television.
The one that I remember most was Theater 13. After the news, weather, and sports, Theater 13 came on, and usually it was Charlie Chan. So I got to stay up and watch it because I didn't have to go to kindergarten.
As for newscasts, the station started with one and then added as the weeks went by, ending up with the 9:30 and 6 o'clock evening news and then the noon show. After a year and a half, network programming was added to the television lineup.
Eventually, we got a microwave hookup with KSTP in the Twin Cities, And that microwave hookup brought us the NBC program.
There were a lot of cartoons on, and of course Hopalong Cassidy. And then your hit parade, but I don't know if that came right away or if that was a little later, but that was a Saturday night thing that you just couldn't miss.
Besides those already mentioned, the NBC lineup brought favorites viewers in this area had only heard about.
Everything was done live at that time. You had live shows on. And so you had the Milton Berle show and many others that were really attracted attention.
First thing I remember is the test pattern. I was 5 years old when we got it, so I'd constantly be bugging my mom when Howdy Doody was coming on. And she would say, well, it's coming on in, let's say, 10 minutes. I didn't know what 10 minutes were. So I was constantly turning the TV on, and it would always be the test pattern.
Others were just as persistent and even appeared hypnotized by the local station.
And now you could actually sit down and watch stuff, and that's how you spent your evenings, watching television, watching wonderful shows.
One of those wonderful shows was Sheriff Bob from right here in the WEAU studio.
The Sheriff Bob Show didn't begin with an audience full of kids, but thanks to a garage door behind our studio and a man who happened to bring a cowboy suit to his new job in Eau Claire, TV 13 created a show still fondly remembered by kids who have long since grown up. One day I asked the sheriff how it all began. Who came up with the character Sheriff?
We had a salesman. Back in Des Moines, I used to do a Saturday morning stint with Hopalong Cassidy. I represented the Northland Dairy, and I had a cowboy outfit on, no children, and we would break for the commercials. There were 3 commercials in it. Well, this salesman was in Des Moines. He came up here about 6 months before I did. When I arrived, one day he said, "You still got that cowboy outfit?" And I said, "Yes." "Why?" "We need a kid show." And he said, "I think we'll call it the Sheriff Bob Show." And I said, "I don't know anything about children's shows. Just because I got the cowboy outfit, are you going to do this to me? You're it." Well, the first shows, we had a flat over there they pulled down. I had an old rickety thing called a fence, and I'd lean up against that, and I would try to ad-lib as much as I could at the opening of the show, and then we'd roll a cartoon, and we didn't have a sponsor. So you had a lot of time to fill. The garage door in the back was left open in the summertime. Pretty soon after the show was on the air, little kids would come through that door and they'd stand by the cameraman. And they'd look and they'd watch. And there started to be quite a collection. And I thought, hey, we're doing this all wrong. I'm working myself to death. They're coming over to see the show. Let's put them in front of the camera. So we did, and each week it get bigger, bigger. Finally, this entire studio floor was like Gull Island hatching out with kids. You couldn't move a camera. So we finally come to the conclusion, let's get those risers out that we use for the choir, and we will have reservations, and that way we can control the group a little bit better. In the meantime, I had 3 great sponsors. Peter's Meats for hot dogs, Bunny Bread for the buns, Dolly Madison Chocolate Milk. They were 3 of the finest sponsors anybody could have, and it fit right into the show. So during the week, it wasn't all the time, you'd do personal appearances at supermarkets, hand out coloring books, there'd be free hot dogs and chocolate milk. It was a wonderful experience.
All because you owned a cowboy suit?
All because I owned a cowboy suit.
Everything that TV 13 puts on your TV screen comes through this 2,000-foot-tall hunk of steel and cables in Fairchild. A little later, we'll look at how our signal has evolved from black and white to color to high definition as it leaves here and ends up here.
And into your homes. We'll also take a look back at memories from NBC News, sports highlights, weather moments, and more memories from people you've met over the past half century as we continue our look back at 50 years with WEAU. It's time to clear up a common misconception about this 1,000-foot tall tower behind our building on South Hastings Way. It is not the tower that transmits Channel 13. A lot of other things, but not us. Not anymore. Our actual tower is about 30 miles away, and about twice as tall. And when it first went up, it got a lot of attention around the country because at the time, it was one of the tallest structures in the country. Brooke Dusk tells us more about living in tall tower territory.
The terrain of Eau Claire changed in late 1953 when a 500-foot tower was constructed to send out the first local television signal in western Wisconsin. WEAU Channel 13's original signal reached out 24 miles from the antenna in Eau Claire. In late 1955, WEAU became affiliated with both NBC and ABC and offered nationwide programming along with the local shows. As television viewership grew, so did the transmission tower. In June of 1957, WEAU went on the air with a new 1,000-foot tower. Now even more people were able to enjoy the television programming of Channel 13. And within a few years, some of those programs were in color.
When I came some 35 years ago, whatever, the station was black and white with network color. Then the next step was to have film color. After that, we had a color studio, the 2 cameras. And then after that yet was color tape machines.
But the signal had to keep up with the times, so in June of 1966, Eau Claire became what was called tall tower territory. A 2,000-foot tower was constructed in Fairchild, Wisconsin, meaning Channel 13 was being broadcast from the largest man-made structure east of the Mississippi. At that time, the 2,000-foot tower covered the largest area by a single television signal, reaching 27 counties in western Wisconsin. Although the tower hasn't grown since 1966, Channel 13 has. In April of 2002, WEAU sent out its first digital signal. Our tower was converted by replacing the transmission line and adding a new antenna. With the addition of a new antenna came the addition of a new channel, high-definition television Channel 39. HD-TV's digital signal brings viewers better picture resolution, a wider screen, and better sound.
It seems like television has a transition of probably 15 to 20 years of something new. And color came in and stereo sound came in. Now we're going with the digital. So what's it going to be in 20 more years?
When you look around the WEAU newsroom of the late 1970s and 1980s, you see typewriters, tape recorders, and rotary dial telephones. A lot of things we don't use in the business anymore. Our tapes are a lot smaller, our editing equipment much more user-friendly. Selena Heller has more about how much effort went into those early days of news gathering.
Now this is a very trusty unit. For example, its batteries never went dead because it didn't have any batteries. You wound it up. You wound it up, and then you could see it.
For the reporter of the 1950s, whether darting off to a fire or covering a council meeting, a small but weighty tool was always in tow.
I have here a Bell & Howell 70DR camera, which was very important to the early television business.
An additional film camera was toted along as well. That one recorded sound, but because it was cumbersome, it was often left behind.
To spruce it up a little bit, sometimes we'd run sound effects behind it. Maybe water splashing, crackling of fire, or sometimes just play music.
After rushing back to prepare for the news, the work of the early TV journalist had only just begun.
Let's say you got in at 4 o'clock and it was going to take 25 or 30 minutes to go through the processor and come out dry. Okay, so then you had to look at it, you had to pick out the scenes that you wanted and hang them up, as I said. Then they had to be spliced together, and you had to write the script.
We tried to get at least 2 film stories a newscast from local stories, which was a real achievement at that time.
Employees here also enlisted the help of some unlikely sources during the early days. An elderly gentleman in the vicinity had some hand-built film processing equipment in his basement.
Once you got done covering a story, then the real challenge was to drive the film over there and knock on Kurt's door and say, "Kurt, we got to have this right away." And then Kurt would process the film and call us up in about an hour, and we'd run over and get the film and edit it and put it on the air.
The station also had reporters in other cities called stringers, very helpful to cover the news, but perhaps problematic in retrieving their products.
Film might come in by bus, but one good way it came in was by bread truck. Well, the red truck left La Crosse, and we knew it was going to wend its way up, maybe to Whitehall or somewhere, and eventually get to Eau Claire. And then the driver would come in and drop off some film. Hey, they gave me some film down there in La Crosse.
The work in newsrooms changed dramatically in the late 70s and early 80s as video cameras hit the industry like a bombshell. They were designed to make news coverage easier and more reliable. So too were trucks with capabilities of being live.
That piece of technology, I think, has changed television completely.
You're still able to see journalists reporting live from a given location. We won't be using those old Bell & Howell cameras or splicing together film. Now we've got cameras that record sound and pictures together and editing equipment that's portable and fast. But even after 50 years and all of the advancements, the basics of journalism remain the same.
It's the same hard-nosed business. You got to work hard at it. It's not easier, it's just different. It's just different.
We shouldn't forget to mention the business of television isn't just about the programs, it's about the commercials. As we go to break for some of today's commercial messages, here's a look at some images from commercials of years gone by. You're watching 50 Years with WEAU.
Shop the All-American Sale at Menards and you could win a 1987 Chrysler Plymouth Horizon America.
I'm Jim Carter, and it's roundup time at Jim Carter Ford, and that's no bull.
You couldn't share 50 years of memories without some of the sports moments that captured our imaginations.
That's right, Judy. The Sports Desk has become its own museum of memories here, celebrating Packers Super Bowls, Badger Rose Bowls, individual successes, and team triumphs. The past 50 years includes many special moments from Major League teams, college sports, and high school action, all throughout the year. The Green Bay Packers have won 12 titles, with many of those games seen on NBC.
A title town again.
Almost 40 years later, Rod Ketter and I were in New Orleans for the Packers' victory in Super Bowl 31, the crowning achievements for quarterback Brett Favre and former coach Mike Holmgren. The TV 13 sports team followed the UW-Eau Claire men's basketball team to Kansas City over and over again for several attempts at a national title. And we've watched the Blue Gold women build a long record of success as well. We watched Mondovi's Tim Krumrie become a fan favorite at nose tackle for the NFL's Cincinnati Bengals. Eau Claire's Herm Johnson brought some hometown pride to the Brickyard at Indianapolis with attempts at the Indy 500 checkered flag. And now Paul Menard is continuing a family tradition of racing as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Jim Crandall, TV 13 Sports Director, and this is Sun City Stadium in Sun City, Arizona.
It seems so long ago since the Brewers were a contending ball club, but hope springs eternal every April as fans went to County Stadium and then Miller Park for opening day.
It is a beautiful day for baseball if you like cloudy skies and about 40 degrees.
And our coverage of high school sports finds us above the diamonds, in the rinks, on the courts, along the sidelines, and anywhere that student athletes are working toward the dream of a state title. In fact, while we try to stay on top of the action, sometimes we find ourselves a little too close to what's going on, but close to the action is where we like to be.
At Soldier Field in Chicago, Bob Gallagher, News Center 13 Sports.
Bob isn't the only one who knows firsthand that weather can affect sports or any other activity in Wisconsin, and around here, severe weather is a fact of life.
That's true, but fortunately, News Center 13 has a long and proud history of providing timely weather information and covering whatever Mother Nature brings us throughout the year. TV 13's news crews have taken you through the mud, through the rain, and through the snow to bring you the ways that weather affects us in western Wisconsin.
Spring at Eau Claire means baseball at Carson Park. Not this year. They were actually supposed to play games last week, but a snow-covered infield is always tough to plan.
How are you right now? 2 hours out in the rain with thousands of people.
These people are the very heart, the very soul, the very definition of country music fans.
The city of Durand was acting as a sponge, with much of the downtown area close to flooding and farmers' fields dotted and drenched with pond-sized puddles.
There are times when the weather requires extended coverage, from droughts to snowstorms to tornadoes. And then there's the yardstick against which all summer storms are measured in Eau Claire. The storm, July 15th, 1980.
How much damage is there here? It looks like there's a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many dollars worth. I
just haven't begun to assess it yet. There's just no end to it.
Fortunately, most of the nasty weather around here is more of an inconvenience. But it's because of the potential for something more that TV 13 remains committed to giving you the full coverage, whatever the weather.
Hello, I'm Peter Dean. I've been a part of TV 13 since 1986, but I'll bet you still don't know who I am. You hear me every day welcoming viewers to another day of WEAU broadcasting and at the start of every newscast. Now, if you'll allow me, I have some work to do. You're watching 50 Years with WEAU. We'll be right back.
A lot of us who are working in this business grew up as news junkies. As kids, we'd save old newspapers, and at night, we'd listen to our AM radios for the latest news from around the world.
News is all about curiosity, wondering what's going on across the country and around our neighborhoods. We'll review what's in the News Center 13 archives in a moment, but let's begin with a more global view provided by NBC News.
Followed today and 2 minutes, and here it is for the first time.
When Channel 13 first went on the air, NBC News was following the start of the Eisenhower administration, the end of the conflict in Korea, and the ongoing Cold War with the Soviet Union.
And here tonight are...
The 1960 presidential election was the first one with televised debates that brought the candidates right to the living rooms of America's voters. The decade brought youth to the White House and to the popular culture as well, in music and in sports. In the summer of 1963, the nation watched a march on Washington and the expression of a dream. Just a few months later, the nation mourned a fallen president and came to grips with the events of that weekend in Dallas.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
The 1960s brought coverage of a war in Vietnam that grew increasingly unpopular as more young men died in a faraway place for a cause that became less clear. Leaders of the time were taken from us in acts of savagery.
Martin Luther King Jr. was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee.
I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
We saw changes in culture. A generation of baby boomers started coming of age in ways that did not reflect their parents' values. We held our breath as a national promise was fulfilled far away.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Richard Nixon reached heights of triumph and shame, from the opening of relations with China to the disgrace of resignation. Jimmy Carter brought a new sense of optimism and then triumph to the Middle East peace process, though a permanent peace remains a faraway dream. In the 80s, a cultural icon was gunned down.
Good evening. Millions of people mourned the tragic death of John Lennon today.
A new president and a pope were nearly murdered as well. A new generation of royalty ascended to the throne of celebrity. A seemingly invincible vehicle disintegrated before our eyes, and a seemingly immutable symbol of the Cold War crumbled, though democracy would not be secured by all those who seek it.
And then the massacre.
In the 90s, Branch Davidians die en masse. A single Ford Bronco eclipses all the other news of the day. Domestic terrorism shatters a city in the heartland. And a president is nearly run out of office by a sex scandal.
Relations with that woman.
The millennium brings hope for a new era of peace, but we are again reminded that America remains a target.
Something deliberate.
NBC News has covered all these events and many more for 77 years now, and will be here on TV 13 for a long time to come, bringing us the events of the world and our country, the people and the stories that bring us together for tears and for joy.
It would be unfair to rank the stories we've covered over the years, but any list would have to include the slow and painful closing of Eau Claire's Uniroyal Tire Factory. 1,300 jobs would be lost directly, many more in related industries.
Employees said all along they just wanted to know for sure. Today they found out. It wasn't the news they wanted to hear.
And as the industrial base of the city was suffering from the hard times of the late 80s, so was the dairy farm base of the Wisconsin heartland.
Landings, about 200 protesters and supporters showed up.
Others would tell you that the most emotional story of the past quarter century involved the issue of Indian spearfishing, a dispute that cast northern Wisconsin into the national spotlight and created a lot of tension on boat landings and a deep division in the state. Back in the city of Eau Claire, as it was undergoing changes to its industrial base, the city was also dealing with the change in the retail landscape. Downtown was fading in popularity. One mall flourished, then faded as well, while another became the new center of commerce. But as manufacturing jobs dwindled with the shutdown of Uniroyal, high technology flourished, turning the Chippewa Valley into what some called the next Silicon Valley. Seymour Cray had built up a company in Chippewa Falls that created a number of spin-offs, including protege Steve Chen's Supercomputer Systems Incorporated, or SSI.
There is still some satisfaction in bringing in new business like Hutchinson Technology.
While the computer industry in the Chippewa Valley has been volatile through the years, the area received an economic boost in the mid-90s with the addition of Hutchinson Technology. Once employing 2,400 people in Eau Claire, the computer part-making plant has also struggled through an uncertain economy and now has just under 1,000 workers. Western Wisconsin's roads also had to change with the times. An interstate system was being built, highways were being upgraded, and there was considerable debate about where to put them. Some 20 years after those early debates, the Highway 53 bypass around Eau Claire is only now starting to take shape.
You can get it on straight.
But perhaps the stories that viewers remember the most are those that involve our neighbors and their stories of courage and perseverance. The story of 13-year-old Jessica Mullenberg, who was abducted from Altoona in 1995 and discovered 3 months later in Texas. Little 2-year-old Paulie Heenick, who was brought back to life after wandering outside his Eau Claire County farm in sub-zero temperatures. And the events that brought the community and the country together. Through the Gulf War and the stories of the many area servicemen and women who served overseas and those who supported them back home. Through the incomprehensible tragedy of September 11th and the local vigils and commemorations that were held to remember those who lost their lives in the terrorist attacks. And now Operation Iraqi Freedom, and again area communities send loved ones off to war and are forced to hope and wait for their safe return. For decades, you've been entertained by programs here on WEAU, many of them from the NBC network.
When Channel 13 became a full affiliate of NBC in 1955, the programs were as varied as the people who watched them. From musical variety shows, such as The Perry Como Show and Your Hit Parade, to the classic Western Bonanza, to the dawn of the game show, a diverse display of entertainment found its way into homes tuned into Channel 13 those first years. The 1960s brought many memorable TV shows to your screen, like that Western in space, Star Trek. Capturing the spirit of their times, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In wrote a new chapter in television. I Spy with Bill Cosby marked the first time a black performer starred in a regular primetime dramatic series. There are so many other memorable series from this decade, everyone had their favorites. The same can be said for the decade that brought us Sanford and Son and Saturday Night Live. By the 70s, viewers were becoming more sophisticated, and so the programs became even more diverse. From Little House on the Prairie, to Real People, to Columbo. There was something for everyone. Then came what some call the second golden age of television. Throughout the 80s, you were entertained by hits like the acclaimed Hill Street Blues and LA Law and trend-setting Miami Vice. And who can forget sitcoms like The Cosby Show, Family Ties, Golden Girls, and Cheers. Many of these shows have gone down in history as some of the best television ever. In the 90s, NBC's dedication to bringing the best of television home to you continued. bringing shows like Wings and Providence and the Law & Order franchise. The network coined the phrase must-see TV, featuring a powerhouse lineup with Frasier, Seinfeld, and Mad About You. ER and Friends debuted shortly after. Through all of these decades, The Tonight Show has been bringing late-night laughs to those who stay up after the news.
Music time? Going. Ja, 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 ding, ding, ding.
I've always been very interested in politics, and I think I've done a very good job of keeping it off the show.
So this may be a first on national television. So stay where you are. We'll be right back.
Let's see how you all feel in 30 years. This, of course, is The Tonight Show.
NBC isn't the only provider of TV 13's entertainment programs. WEAU's dedication to bringing you quality programming includes syndicated programs like Inside Edition, The Oprah Winfrey Show, Jeopardy, and Wheel of Fortune. The Oprah Winfrey Show has been undoubtedly one of the most popular syndicated shows ever. Since 1986, TV 13 viewers have laughed and cried with one of the most recognizable hosts in daytime television. This pop culture icon and television phenomenon is celebrating 20 years in 2003. What is Jeopardy? In 1988, when Wheel of Fortune came to Channel 13, a vowel cost $250, and still does. Phil Donahue, with a groundbreaking new idea called The Talk Show, was a part of the WEAU lineup from 1977 until 1995. Hee Haw was a Saturday evening staple of the TV 13 schedule for many years. And Little House on the Prairie was syndicated on WEAU for almost a decade after it ended its run on NBC. At WEAU, we are more than just a vendor of news and entertainment programming. Our viewers can depend on us to respond to issues and needs across western Wisconsin.
To us, being a local broadcaster means being a partner with our communities and reaching out to our viewers with meaningful information. And we do that every day. The station donates public service announcement airtime every day to raise awareness about issues that concern our communities. Through telethons, the station has raised money for a number of charitable causes in our local area, such as United Cerebral Palsy, the March of Dimes, and the Muscular Dystrophy Association. To us, involvement is as important as raising money and awareness. WEAU has partnered with local chapters of organizations such as the American Heart Association, the American Red Cross, and the United Way. Our public service work responds to and reflects the dedication of our viewers in making western Wisconsin a better place.
Serving our communities also means celebrating what makes communities in western Wisconsin so special. TV 13 has done just that, featuring many of our communities in a project called Our Town. Since 1991, the station has turned the spotlight on local towns, big and small, to show all of western Wisconsin the great qualities their neighbors have to offer. Could we possibly celebrate any TV 13 milestone without bringing back the tune that was stuck in our heads for years and years and years?
And years and years. So don't hold back. You know the words.
There's a feeling in the air that you can't get anywhere except Wisconsin. Taking pride in what you do, the spirit shows in you, Wisconsin. From across the countryside to the cities filled with pride, we're reaching for the sky. From where the woodlands grow to where the rivers flow, we're all good neighbors passing by. Makes no difference where I go, you're the best place that I know. Hello, Wisconsin. Hello, Wisconsin. TV 13 loves you.
It's been 20 years now since Judy and I first met while taking journalism classes at UW-Eau Claire. That kind of familiarity is great to have in a coworker.
And familiarity is one of our strong suits at TV 13. We've enjoyed the friendships and hard work of many people with whom you've become familiar over the years.
Our news director, John Hoffman, tells us more about some of our old friends.
From the church lobby to the checkout line at the grocery store and everywhere in between, I get to talk to a lot of you about what is seen here on Channel 13. It is far and away the most enjoyable part of my career. There's a real bond among viewers of this station compared to others around the country. In fact, it's almost a feeling of ownership, and we appreciate every one of those comments. I'm often asked where certain people have gone after they have left the station to chase other opportunities. Here are a few I'd like to share with you. You've already met this cast of characters. Mike Rindo is the Director of Communications for UW-Eau Claire. John Inger is the Director of Communications for UW-Stout. Jim Mertens has anchored WEAU-TV in Moline, Illinois. Jim Crandall has been sports director for years at KTXL-TV in Sacramento, California. Eric Hansen is at KCCI-TV in Des Moines, Iowa, where he just won an Edward R. Murrow Award, one of journalism's top honors for his storytelling skills. Bill Hudson is at WCCO-TV in Minneapolis. Renee Tessman is just across town at KARE 11 News, and that's where you'll also find meteorologist Don Moldenauer. Scott Cohn, seen here on our first 5 p.m. broadcast in 1981, is a financial reporter for CNBC. Kathy Beeson is executive producer for News and Public Affairs at Wisconsin Public Television and still co-hosts WEAU's United Cerebral Palsy Telethon. Rob Krybick has represented Eau Claire in the State Assembly for 11 years. Michelle Tuckner covers the Packers on a daily basis for Channel 2 in Green Bay. And Chris Earle is a sports director at Channel 6 in Duluth. We've said untimely goodbyes to old friends like Cindy Schott in 1991 and Jim Riggs in 1996. Barry Robinson is still serving on the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors, where he has served for a long, long time. And our old friend John Freud is loving life, living alongside a golf course in northern Florida. Whether they've stayed in television or pursued other careers, every one of these people brought great talents to our newsroom while they were here, and will continue that tradition of top-notch reporting for decades to come.
We'll be right back.
For 50 years, the people at WEAU Television have been pleased to be part of the community. It's a time that has seen tremendous changes in communications and society.
It would be hard to overstate the changes brought by television and the changes that have occurred in television since our first night of December 23, 1953. But our job at the local level remains largely unchanged. It involves a commitment to news and information, entertainment, and public service.
It's a commitment that exists because of you. Your input, your involvement have made TV 13 a 50-year success story.
So we thank you, and we invite you to stay with us for a long time to come. I'm Pat Kreitlow.
I'm Judy Clark. Thank you for joining us in celebrating 50 years with WEAU.